Hello, I've received some questions about two videos I made on Venus star points. So in this video, it will be a third video that I've decided to make in this series on Venus star points to answer those questions and address some issues that have been brought up. So I'm going to discuss four things. And by the way, you do not need to go back to the previous videos. This video expands and builds upon previous videos, but you can also watch this one independent of the other two. The four issues I'm going to address is number one, there's a complexity in a polarity of yin-yang star points that I did not discuss before. I'm going to discuss what this yin-yang polarity is and what the additional complexity is that I didn't mention before. Number two, some Venus star points involve a change of zodiac signs. In fact, there's one on October 22nd, 2022, that people are talking about where one of the star points changes signs. How does a star point change signs? Is it really unusual? Is it significant? Let's talk about that. Number three, there's another thing that can happen, which is very special. Sometimes, and it's rare, but it happens, a Venus star point will be an occultation. An occultation is similar to the idea of an eclipse, but instead of involving the sun and moon, it involves other celestial objects. It's a very special thing, just like an eclipse is. Let's talk about the occultations, how often they occur, and what they might mean, and that leads to our fourth topic of interpretation. I haven't talked much about the details of interpreting Venus star points, and I'll give you a resource you can go to for more information about interpretation. So let's go over these 4 points about Venus star points. Number one, the complexity of polarity. This yin-yang polarity. The yin-yang polarity is created by each successive Sun-Venus conjunction seesawing back and forth. You can think of this seesaw in several ways. One way is this. You'll have Venus retrograde when it's conjunct the Sun, then Venus is direct, then retrograde, then direct. It flip-flops between Venus retrograde and Venus direct. So for example, on August 13th, 2023, Sun and Venus will be conjunct. And I put it in a red, a pink background, and I put a little red image here to identify that Venus is retrograde. The next one will occur 9.5 months later, and Venus will be direct. And then the next one, the next Sun-Venus conjunction, is again retrograde. So it alternates between retrograde and direct. Now, I referred to the Sun-Venus conjunctions, the ones with the light blue or greenish background here. I refer to those as yang because Venus is direct. And we can think of the direct and relatively fast direct motion of Venus as being simple, pushing energy out, direct, uncomplicated, like a simple moving out into the world. When a planet is retrograde, it's going back into itself, more internalized, reviewing, more thoughtful, less expressive, more drawing in. So retrograde we can naturally think of, we could call it yin in a common sense way. But here's the complexity. There's a way in which when Venus is retrograde, some people would argue it also has a yang quality. Why would Venus retrograde, going back into itself, be more expressive and outer? You can argue that that's true. In fact, the greatest expert in astrology on Venus star points, Ariel Gutman, the astrologer who focuses very intensely on Venus star points, working with them all the time, she makes an argument that when Venus is retrograde, it's actually more yang. How is that happening? Let me give you a demonstration of how that happens. Here is the conjunction of Sun and Venus on October 22nd, 2022. The exact time Sun and Venus are conjunct to a second of arc at 10 hours, 17 minutes, 20 seconds p.m. in London, England. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, but if you were in London, that would be the time it's happening. And there's this Sun-Venus conjunction. Happens to be towards the bottom of the chart in the 4th house. Now, let's go 2 hours later. Where will Sun and Venus be? Now, this is a Sun-Venus conjunction where Venus is direct. 9.5 months in the future, there'll be another Sun-Venus conjunction, and Venus will be retrograde. Like I said, it'll alternate. This is direct. I called that Yang. Now, 2 hours later, the whole sky is spinning around. Sun and Venus are going to be coming closer, moving towards the ascendant. And which one will Sun and Venus still be conjunct exactly? No, it'll be 2 hours later. Venus is faster, so Venus is leaving the Sun. Venus is faster. It's going to only a little bit faster than the Sun, so it'll move into the Zodiac farther ahead. So let's do a time adjust to see this. I'm in the Sirius astrology software. I'm going to go 2 hours later, 2 hours, hit the right arrow, and there's the Sun and Venus and all the planets, the whole sky spinning around. And now Venus is 1 minute of arc after the Sun. We go another 2 hours. Now Venus is 2 minutes after the Sun. Another 2 hours. Now Venus is 4 minutes after the Sun. The Sun is 29 Libra 42. Venus is 29 Libra 46. So of course Venus is faster. It's direct. It's going faster than the Sun. It's leaving the Sun. We'll go another 2 hours later. It's getting near sunrise. And now Venus is 5 minutes past the Sun. Which one is going to rise first, Sun or Venus? The planet earlier in the Zodiac rises first. Sun will rise and then Venus. Now, they're so close together that if you went outside and looked at it, you wouldn't see Venus because it'll be overpowered by the light of the Sun. But a few weeks later, there'll be enough separation between Sun and Venus that you will see Venus. You won't see Venus in the morning because Sun will rise first and it'll be bright out, so you won't see Venus. You don't see the stars and planets during the day. Venus will be an evening star. So here's the point. When Venus is direct and conjunct the Sun, it's like a seed. It's like planting a seed that soon will lead to Venus being an evening star. Got it? Very simple. Venus is direct. It's getting further ahead in the Zodiac. That means the Sun will rise first. The Sun will set first. And after the Sun sets, and a few weeks into the future, when Sun and Venus are farther apart from each other, you will see Venus as an evening star. Venus as an evening star is often considered to be more yin. And Venus as a morning star, Venus rising first, is sometimes, in a lot of traditions of astrology, is more yang. So there's the complexity. When you have the Sun-Venus conjunction and Venus is direct, yes, Venus is fast, in your face. You could think of it as more yang, less complicated, more expressive, simpler, outgoing. But Venus is now planted. The seed has been planted for Venus to be moving ahead of the Sun and moving into becoming an evening star, which some people think of the evening star as more yin. That's the complexity. So which one is yin, which one is yang? That's going to depend on your philosophy and understanding of astrology, and most importantly, your work with this. Has somebody studied these conjunctions, related them to events, and distinguished what's going on? We'll talk about that later when we get to the interpretation. My point here is you can make an argument both ways. You can argue that Sun-Venus, when Venus is direct, is yang. You can argue it's yin. You can argue it has qualities of both. Okay, so that's something I just wanted to mention, that there are different points of view on which one is the more yang, which one is the more yin. Is it the direct Venus more yang, or is the retrograde Venus more yang? Okay, that's point number 1. Back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Now, changing zodiac signs. Here's what I did. I produced a listing of Sun-Venus conjunctions from 1950 to 2100 in the Sirius software. I produced the listing. I clicked on a little button to show it in a word processing program, and then I highlighted in green when Venus changes signs. And here is the listing. Let me scroll up here. 1 second. Scroll up and let me drag this. Sorry, I didn't get this nicely situated. Let me lift this up here so we don't have all that stuff. And let's make this listing longer. Okay, so I'm putting this in the captured area of the screen. So here it is, starting in 1950. And what's happening is that there's a rhythm of zodiac signs. If we start in 1950, it happens to be Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Cancer, Aries. Got it? Aquarius, Scorpio, Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Cancer, Aries. It repeats. Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Cancer, Aries. Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Cancer, Aries. Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, instead of Cancer, changed to Gemini. Of course, it repeats over and over the same signs because that's the whole idea of the Venus star points. They get distributed in 5 points of a star at almost the same position, moving about 2 degrees every 8 years. Well, each of those points moving 2 degrees every 8 years, sooner or later, one of them changes signs. So one of the 5 points, only one of the 5 points, changes from Cancer to Gemini. Notice it goes retrograde through the signs. It goes from Cancer to Gemini on June 19th, 1964. There's your zodiac sign change. If those 5 points are important, and I believe they are, many astrologers do, and they're connected, they're creating this circuitry in the sky, this geometry in the sky. When one of those points changes signs, it should change the flavor of what's going on. So you'll see that it doesn't happen very often. I highlighted in green. I just looked through this listing very carefully. I'll tell you what the yellow is later. Skip the yellow for now. In 1986 and then followed in 1987, there were 2 of the 5 points changed signs. In 1986, one of the points changed from Aquarius to Capricorn. The following year, in 1987, one changed from Virgo to Libra. And you can start at any one of the 5 points. If I start with Aries, I now have Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini. So it's going to repeat Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini. And you'll see I can go a whole bunch of years all the way up to October 22nd, 2022. So it's very rare. It does not happen very often that one of the 5 star points changes signs. And one of them is changing on October 22nd, 2022 from Scorpio to Libra. So is it unusual? Yes. Is it significant? Probably is. We could study individual charts for when these things get triggered, mundane astrology, and see if it makes sense. But that's what it is. It is, in fact, very unusual. I put in gray over here on October 24th, 2026. That star point reverts back to Scorpio. So it's going from Scorpio to Libra, but it's not exactly 1 degree every 4 years. It vacillates a little bit. And so by 2032, it has clearly moved. Well, after, when we get down to Libra, by 2034, that point is now clearly in Libra. So it goes into Libra, goes back to Scorpio from one time. Now it's going to be in Libra for over 100 years. It's about 112 years that each point of the star stays in a sign. So now 112 divided by 5, every 23 or 24 years on average, one of the points changes signs. Let me say that again. Every 23 to 24 years on average, one of the points changes signs. So it is unusual, But that's on average. We saw 2 points changing signs within 1 year of each other. And you can go 40 years without any of them changing signs. So it varies. But it's rare. Bottom line is, it is unusual. It is interesting that one of the points goes into Libra. We see some sign changes all the way out in 2076, 2081. And here's a summary. Let me scroll this up to the top of what we're looking at. And there's a summary of zodiac signs. From up till 1964, I started in 1950. So from before 1950, 1964, that was the 5 signs: Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Cancer, Aries. Cancer changed to Gemini in 1964. I just showed you that. It stays that way till 1986. So for 22 years, it's Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Gemini, Aries. Then in 86, we get a change. The following year in 87, we get a change. So from 1987 to 2022, what is that? 35 years. This is the rhythm of the point of where the Sun-Venus conjunctions occur: Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini, Aries. So there it is. And about every 112 years, it will vary from 111 years to 120 years. Somewhere over 100 years it takes for a point. Each point will stay in a sign for over 100 years. So this point that is in Capricorn from 1986 to 2097. That's 113 years. 1986 to 2097. 113 years, no, 111 years. So it's typical. Somewhere in that range, 108, 105 to 120, somewhere in that range is how long each point stays inside. So it is important. And a lot of people are thinking, wow, one of the Venus star points going into Libra might be a lot sweeter, gentler, kinder than what it was in Scorpio. You can go back and look at historically what happens, and that's what I did. I looked at 1700 to 1900, and we see that Venus was, let's go down here, in 1771, the same thing happened. That's happening in 2022. Venus, one of the 5 points, went from Scorpio to Libra. So it's been a long time since one of the star points was in Libra. And down here I have a summary. Here's when it comes out of Libra in 1879. I summarize it. Conclusion: a Venus star point was in Libra from 1773 to 1879. And the next time a star point is in Libra begins on October 22nd, 2022. So that's, 150 years roughly since one of the star points was in Libra. So it's unusual. That's what the zodiac sign changes are. And it could very, very well be significant. It would be up to someone to look at these historical trends and what goes on in people's lives and see if it makes sense. Okay, next point I want to cover is occultations. This is fascinating. When we look at the listing, let's go back to this listing we're just looking at. Let's go back to the one starting in 1950. This is a listing of all of the conjunctions of Sun and Venus that I produced in the Sirius software. I just saved it to file and brought it up here. And this is showing the latitude of Venus. The latitude of the Sun is always 0. This is how far Venus is off the ecliptic plane. And here's what happens. Let's go down to the first yellow highlighted one. I'm starting in 1950. I have to scroll all the way down to 1984. So the first time I see Venus close to 0, and I use 16 minutes. So from 0 south 16 to 0 north 16, within 16 minutes will be an occultation. Either Venus will move in front of the sun, or the sun has moved in front of Venus. And by producing a listing of direct and retrograde, I put a little D for direct. So this one, Venus is direct. When Venus is direct, that means Venus was behind the sun covered Venus. It's not as dramatic because you're not seeing what happens when Venus is retrograde. That means Venus is in front of the sun. And if you have a large enough telescope, you'd see the little dot, a little tiny dot of Venus going right across the sun. Just like an eclipse when the moon moves in front of the sun, it blocks the sun. But of course, the moon is about the same size visually as the sun. So it blocks, can cover the whole sun or most of the sun. If it's Venus instead of the moon, same idea. It's the same idea as an eclipse. The Venus has moved right in front of the sun. It's just a little tiny dot. But this one's direct, means that the sun is in front of the Venus. And most of the times when there's an occultation, it's when Venus is direct and the sun is in front of Venus. So we see all these D's. This means the sun is in front of Venus. And here's one where I put the R for retrograde and I made it red on June 8th, 2004. When Venus was conjunct the sun, its latitude was 0 south 11. If it's 16 minutes or less, it means there was an occultation. Venus moved in front of the sun. So when you're looking at this listing, you can see which ones are a direct alignment. And if you check to see if it was retrograde or direct, if it's retrograde, that means Venus was directly in front of the sun. So it happened in 2004, in June of 2004, again in 2008. That one's direct, again in 2012. So 2004, 2012, June 6, 2012, Venus latitude was 9 minutes. And we allow 16, so that's about 15 to 16 minutes. So that was an occultation. And in fact, let me show you this. If we go back to our browser, here is the 2012 occultation. I'm going to play this. This little YouTube video. Let me just play it, and then I'll show you the credits for it. But let's play it. And right here, there's a little dot is going across. I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, go. There's a little dot. That was it. That little dot, that is Venus. This is extremely rare that Venus actually moved right across the face of the sun. And again, when you look at the listing, you know that happened because the latitude of Venus was less than 16. And it was 9, which made it go. Let me go back to the beginning of that. Well, here's another image of it. I'll show you another one. Here's Venus, and actually, here's the surface of the sun. Actually, it's bright. Of course, the sun's giving off all this light. You can actually see Venus before it reaches the surface of the sun. So this is more realistic. And you see Venus is visible before it reaches the surface of the sun. Okay, so that's it. Let me show you that one more time. This one starting here, going right across the face of the sun. And this one, where we see, let me move it a little bit at a time, there's Venus coming across the sun, and there it is a little bit later. And notice it's not going through the middle. If Venus's latitude was exactly 0, It's 0 north 09 for this eclipse on June. This is the, not eclipse, the occultation on June 6th, 2012. If Venus had a latitude of exactly 0, it would go right through the center of the sun. It would pass right through the middle, and it would be there for a much longer period of time. When the latitude gets out to 0 north 16, it's grazing the edge. Or 0 south 16, grazing the edge. Here's 0 north 09, so it's right up in that range. There you have it. You can see how close a Sun-Venus conjunction is to being an occultation just by looking at the latitude of Venus in this listing that you can produce with the Sirius software. So back to my PowerPoint over here. Excuse me. So to quote from a website, space.com, astronomy website, in space, an occultation happens when one object passes in front of another from the observer's perspective. A simple example is a solar eclipse. From some areas on Earth, the moon passes in front of the sun and either partially or totally blocks the light. So an eclipse is a kind of an occultation. It's an occultation between the sun and moon. If it involves, say, Venus and the sun, we don't call it an eclipse, we just call it an occultation. Venus making an occultation with the sun. Okay. Occultation comes from occult, which means hidden. So it's something's hiding something else or getting in front of it. Okay, now, but from the point of view of astrologers, these yellow star points might be more powerful than other ones. Just like eclipses are more powerful new moons and full moons. We give special attention to them. Therefore, it would be reasonable to assume that these particular star points, the one on June 11, 2000, and maybe when Venus is retrograde and that little dot of Venus moves across the face of the sun, excuse me, similar to a solar eclipse when the moon moves in front of the sun, maybe it's particularly important. So this one on June 8th, 2004 at 17 Gemini 53. Something to look at, something to research. And the one on June 6, 2012 at 15 Gemini. This means that if you have planets at 15 to 17 degrees Gemini, then they were getting triggered by these star points in 2004, 2016, and especially, you could argue, especially strong triggering because they were also occultations, which, just like an eclipse, might be more significant than just any other Sun-Venus conjunction. So interesting things about star points. Sometimes there's a zodiac sign change. Sometimes there's an occultation. So how far Venus is from the sun in latitude could be important. Okay, there's some other things I could mention. I don't want to get too technical here, but when Venus is direct and its sun is getting in front of Venus, Venus is far away, the range of latitudes is smaller. So, you know, suppose your cat is stuck up in a tree and you look up at the tree and the tree's close to you. You say, there's a cat up there. And then as you walk farther from the tree, you say, you're not pointing up. The farther something away is, the more horizontal it is. So when Venus is direct, Venus is far away from us. The sun is in front, and the variation in latitude is less. That's why so many of these direct alignments, and there's Venus having low latitude, that's why most of them are direct. See, direct, direct, direct. Let's scroll down to the next yellow one, direct. It's relatively unusual for it to happen when Venus is retrograde. That's why. Direct, retrograde, direct. Well, here we got two retrogrades. But here's, again, they're direct. So Venus retrograde forming an occultation, moving directly in front of the sun, is more rare than the sun moving in front of Venus, because Venus's geocentric latitude, the latitude from our point of view, varies more when Venus is retrograde because it's closer to us. Okay, just some information about what's going on with some star points being a change of signs. We discussed that. And what's going on with these occultations making very special star points. It might be, perhaps, that Venus retrograde and forming an occultation might be the most special of all. Perhaps. I mean, dramatically, visually it's very dramatic, with that little dot moving across the face of the sun. Okay. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover there. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. So that's occultation, similar to eclipses. And just to show you something that confirms that all of this works the way we're saying, is that from a website at space.com, astronomy site, it says only 6 Venus transits have occurred since 1631. There was one in 1761, 1769, 1874, 1882, 2004, and 2012. Only 6, going all the way back hundreds of years. And if you look at the listing, those are the only ones where Venus is retrograde in this listing. The highlighted ones where there's the one, first one where Venus is retrograde, there it is. June 6, 1761. And then the next one, 1769. 1761, 1769. It matches perfectly. All I'm saying is that you can go to an astronomy site, look at all of the listing that they tell you when there was an occultation. Venus in front of the sun means Venus is retrograde and conjunct. The sun and the latitude is 16 minutes or less. That's the occultation. Venus is occulting the sun, moving in front of the sun. Anyway, I'm just showing you that the listing and the information from the sites agrees, and also the smaller the latitude, the longer it lasts. And what we have from observation, here's from Wikipedia article, how long each one of these occultations lasted, how long was Sun-Venus in front of the sun, so you could watch it if you have a high-powered telescope to see it. And what we conclude is that if the latitude of Venus is about 9 minutes, it lasts 6 to 7 hours. If the latitude is 11 minutes, it lasts about 6 hours. 14 minutes, 4 hours. I get out to 16 minutes, only 3 hours. We don't have any cases smaller than 9 minutes in recent history, but it would last even longer. Seems to me it would last at least 12 hours if one occurred, a Sun-Venus conjunction where Venus is retrograde and the latitude was extremely close to 0. Okay, well, that's it. Let's see. I showed you these things. Now, interpretation was our last topic. To get good with the interpretation of Venus star points, you need to spend a lot of time looking at them in people's charts, looking at it mundane. And rather than me tell you my impressions of what Sun-Venus means, I'll just refer you to Ariel Gutman. She's the person who wrote the book on Venus star points. She works with them all the time. It's her specialization. And also, I use an evidence-based system of astrology. And in this evidence-based system of astrology, we don't depend on theory and just logic. We use theory and logic, but we have to substantiate it with observations. And I haven't made those observations. Ariel's made a lot more. So I would refer you to her. And here is her YouTube channel called Venus Star Point. So you can go to it, and she's got some videos, and of course her book on the Venus Star Point. So I don't want to, add to the intro. I know everybody wants to know. People are asking me, well, I have this planet there. What does it mean? No one astrologer is an expert in everything. It's something I haven't studied enough and worked with enough to have as much confidence as someone like Ariel would have. Okay, now, I think that's it. The only thing I want to wrap up with is just our usual closing information. Here's the exciting breakthrough book on a scientific breakthrough in astrology, and the new Academic Research Institute, Cosmobiology Institute, and the website for it, and the software that we use for vibrational astrology, and the annual conference. The one in 2023 will be March 3rd through 5th. It's usually in the first week of March every year in Gainesville, Florida. It's a live in-person conference. That's it, my friends. We are at 35 minutes. It's just about right. I don't like to go much over a half hour. So this is our third, and I think our last. I didn't think I'd be making a third video, but probably our last video, unless other things come up, about Venus star points. So there's a series of 3 videos. This is the third and last one, going into all kinds of details about Venus star points. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Oh, one other thing, classes. I wanted to mention, I was just about to do my final sign-off. Go to astrologydc.com if you're interested in taking classes. If you're watching this video when I'm making it, or within a few months, I'm starting a new group of classes in January 2023. So you can go to astrologydc.com and click on the button there for information about the classes I'll be teaching with very small group, highly specialized, intensive training for people that want to master the vibrational astrology. Okay, now I'll sign off. Okay, thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.